get shot, but he trusted to his strength and agility against a man who was almost certainly wearied. When he had got him safe, explanations might follow. Peter was now enjoying himself hugely. If only these infernal guns kept silent, he would play out the game in the sober, decorous way he loved. So very delicately he began to wriggle forward to where the sound was. The night was now as black as ink round him, and very quiet too, except for the sawings of the dying gale. The snow had drifted a little in the lee of the ruined walls, and Peter's progress was naturally very slow. He could not afford to dislodge 1 ounce of snow. Still the tinkling went on, now in greater volume. Peter was in terror lest it should cease before he got his man. Presently his hand clutched at empty space. He was on the lip of the front trench. The sound was now a yard to his right, and with infinite care he shifted his position. Now the bell was just below him, and he felt the big rafter of the woodwork from which it had fallen. He felt something else, a stretch of wire fixed in the ground with the far end hanging in the void. That would be the spy's explanation if anyone heard the sound and came seeking the cause. Somewhere in the darkness before him and below was the man, not a yard off. Peter remained very still, studying the situation. He could not see, but he could feel the presence, and he was trying to decide the relative position of the man and bell and their exact distance from him. The thing was not so easy as it looked, for if he jumped for where he believed the figure was, he might miss it and get a bullet in the stomach. A man who played so risky a game was probably handy with his firearms. Besides, if he should hit the bell, he would make a hideous row and alarm the whole front. Fate suddenly gave him the right chance. The unseen figure stood up and moved a step, until his back was against the parados. He actually brushed against Peter's elbow, who held his breath. There is a catch that the Kaffirs have, which would need several diagrams to explain. It is partly a neck hold, and partly a paralyzing backward twist of the right arm, but if it is practiced on a man from behind, it locks him as sure as if he were handcuffed. Peter slowly got his body raised and his knees under him, and reached for his prey. He got him. A head was pulled backward over the edge of the trench, and he felt in the air the motion of the left arm pawing feebly but unable to reach behind. "Be still," whispered Peter in German. "I mean you no harm. We are friends, the same purpose. Do you speak German?" "Nein," said a muffled voice. "English?" "Yes," said the voice. "Thank God," said Peter. "Then we can understand each other. I have watched your notion of signalling, and a very good one it is. I've got to get through the Russian lines somehow before morning, and I want you to help me. I'm English, a kind of English, so we're on the same side. If I let go your neck, will you be good and talk reasonably?" The voice assented. Peter let go, and in the same instant slipped to the side. The man wheeled around and flung out an arm, but gripped vacancy. "Steady, friend," said Peter. "You mustn't play tricks on me, or I'll be angry." "Who are you? Who sent you?" asked a puzzled voice. Peter hid a happy thought. "The companions of the rosy hours," he said. "Then we are friends indeed," said the voice. "Come out of the darkness, friend, and I will do you no harm. I am a good Turk, and I fought beside the English in Kordofan, and learned their language. I live only to see the ruin of the Enver, who has beggared my family and slain my twin brother. Therefore I serve the Muskov Jars. I don't know what the musky jaws are, but if you mean the Russians, I'm with you. I've got news for them which would make Enver green. The question is how I'm to get to them, and that is where you shall help me, my friend." "How?" "By playing that little tune of yours again. Tell them to expect within the next half-hour a deserter with an important message. Tell them, for God's sake, not to fire at anyone until they've made certain it isn't me." The man took the blunt end of his bayonet and squatted beside the bell. The first stroke brought out a clear, searching note which floated down the valley. He struck 3 notes at slow intervals. For all the world, Peter said, he was like a telegraph operator calling up a station. "Send the message in English," said Peter. "They may not understand it," said the man. "Then send it any way you like. I trust you, for we are brothers." After 10 minutes the man ceased and listened. From far away came the sound of a trench gong, the kind of thing they used on the Western Front to give the gas alarm. "They say they will be ready," he said. I cannot take down messages in the darkness, but they have given me the signal which means consent." "Come, that is pretty good," said Peter. "And now I must be moving. You take a hint from me. When you hear big firing up to the north, get ready to beat a quick retreat, for it will all be up with that city of yours. And tell your folk, too, that they're making a bad mistake letting those fool Germans rule their land. Let them hang Enver and his little friends, and we'll be happy once more." "May Satan receive his soul," said the Turk. "There is wire before us, but I will show you a way through. The guns this evening made many rents in it. But haste, for a working party may be here presently to repair it. Remember, there is much wire before the other lines." Peter, with certain directions, found it pretty easy to make his way through the entanglement. There was one bit which scraped a hole in his back, but very soon he had come to the last posts and found himself in open country. The place, he said, was a graveyard among the unburied dead that smelt horribly as he crawled among them. He had no inducements to delay, for he thought he could hear behind him the movement of the Turkish working party, and was in terror that a flare might reveal him and a volley accompany his retreat. From one shell hole to another he wormed his way, until he struck an old ruinous communication trench which led in the right direction. The Turks must have been forced back in the past week, and the Russians were now in the evacuated trenches. The thing was half full of water, but it gave Peter a feeling of safety, for it enabled him to get his head below the level of the ground. Then it came to an end, and he found before him a forest of wire. The Turk in his signal had mentioned half an hour, but Peter thought it was near 2 hours before he got through that noxious entanglement. Shelling had made little difference to it. The uprights were all there, and the barbed strands seemed to touch the ground. Remember, he had no wire cutter, nothing but his bare hands. Once again fear got hold of him. He felt caught in a net, with monstrous vultures waiting to pounce on him from above. At any moment a flare might go up, and a dozen rifles find their mark. He had altogether forgotten about the message which had been sent, for no message could dissuade the ever-present death he felt around him. It was, he said, like following an old lion into bush, when there was but one narrow way in and no road out. The guns began again, the Turkish guns, from behind the ridge, and a shell tore up the wire a short way before him. Under cover of the burst he made a few good yards, leaving large portions of his clothing in the strands. Then, quite suddenly, when hope had almost died in his heart, he felt the ground rise steeply. He lay very still. A star rocket from the Turkish side lit up the place, and there in front was a rampart with the points of bayonets showing beyond it. It was the Russian hour for stand to. He raised his cramped limbs from the ground, shouted, "Friend! English!" A face looked down at him, and then the darkness again descended. "Friend!" he said hoarsely. "English!" He heard speech beyond the parapet. An electric torch was flashed on him for a second. A voice spoke, a friendly voice, and the sound of it seemed to be telling him to come over. He was standing now, and as he got his hands on the parapet, he seemed to feel the bayonets very near him. But the voice that spoke was kindly, so with a heave he scrambled over and flopped into the trench. Once more the electric torch was flashed, and revealed to the eyes of the onlookers an indescribably dirty, lean, middle-aged man with a bloody head and scarcely a rag of shirt on his back. The said man, seeing friendly faces around him, grinned cheerfully. "That was a rough trek, friends," he said. "I want to see your general pretty quick, for I've got a present for him." He was taken to an officer in a dugout, who addressed him in French, which he did not understand, but the sight of Sturm's plan worked wonders. After that he was fairly bundled down communication trenches, and then over swampy fields to a farm among trees. There he found staff officers, who looked at him and looked at his map, and then put him on a horse and hurried him eastwards. At last he came to a big ruined house, and was taken into a room which seemed full of maps and generals. The conclusion must be told in Peter's words. There was a big man sitting at a table drinking coffee, and when I saw him my heart jumped out of my skin, for it was the man I had hunted with on the Pungwa in '98, him whom the Kaffirs called Buck's Horn because of his long curled moustaches. He was a prince even then, and now he is a very great general. When I saw him I ran